Hello, everybody. Welcome to Voices Big and Small. And on this episode, we're going to be taking a look at Houston-based voice actress Shelley Calene-Black. So, without no further ado, let's get started here. Shelley Calene-Black, born April 30th, 1979, in Fort Worth, Texas, is an American voice actress who has provided voices for a number of English language versions of Japanese anime, films, and television series. She has worked for Funimation, ADV Films, and Sentai Filmworks. Some of her leading voice roles include Muriel in Noir, Kyo Fujibayashi in Clannad, Medaka Karakami in Medaka Box, um, Hamut Meseda in The Book of Bantora, and Hime in Princess Resurrection. In live action films, she played the lead role of Maria Patterson in Kotowski's Marusz Kotowski directed Holocaust film Esther's Diary. Shelley was born and raised in Texas. She studied theater at the University of Houston and worked on stage in New York City. After returning to Houston, she worked on local theater groups such as the Alley Theater and Stage's Repertory Theater. So now let's go ahead and go take a look at some of the roles she has been involved with. Shelley got her a start with ADV back in 1998. Um, when she was cast as the English voice of a mother in the anime movie Grave of the Fireflies. She was then cast as the English voice of Mistress Celsia Marie Claire in the ADV dub of Those Who Hunt Elves. Then in 2000, she'd be cast in the as the she'd be cast in the the dub of Sin the movie um, as the English voice of Jennifer Christina J.C. Armatt. And then in 2001, she'd be cast she'd be cast in the English voice of Cleo Everlasting in Sorceress Stabber Orphan. In Princess Nine, she'd be cast as the English voice of Mao Daidoji. Then as we get into 2002, in Steel Angel Karumi, she'd be cast the English voice of Dr. Reiko Amagi. In Chance Pop Session in 2002, she'd be cast the English voice of Reika. And in 2003, she'd be cast in one of her first lead roles of a series in the dark anime Noir, as she'd be cast as the English voice of Muriel Bouquet. And then in Colorful, she'd be cast as a number of number of supporting characters in the English dub, including a reporter, drunk slut, parade girl, cocktail party girl, brunette on train, grand prize, and ET chick. In Rune Soldier, she'd be casting the voice of Melissa. In The Samurai, she'd be casting the voice of Akari Toki. In the Unlimited Saga video game, she'd be casting those voices of Platyphyllum and Typhon. In Najiga Blitz Tactics, she'd be casting the voice of Athena Gilnand. In the ADV dub of Saint Seiya, she'd be casting the voices of Chameleon June and Sega. In In the anime Battle Doll Angelic Layer, she'd be cast as English voices of Madoka Fujisaki and Tsubasa Mackenzie. In Pre-Tier, she'd be cast as English voice of Mayune Awayuki. She would then reprise her role as Cleo Everlasting in Sorceress, Stabber, Orphan, Revenge. Then, as we move into 2004, in Kino's journey, she would be cast as the English voices of the librarian and the lovely assistant. She would be cast as the English voice of Tessera in Gravion in 2004. Also in 2004, Nurse Witch Komugi should be cast as the English voice of Asuka Sakurai. In the Funimation dub of One Piece, she'd be cast as the English voice of Khalifa. In the Lady Death anime movie, she'd be cast as English voices of Lucifer's concubines and Slave Girl. In Sister Princess, she'd be cast as English voice of Shikage. In the Appleseed anime movie, she'd be cast as the English voice of we know the word is Nike because of the shoe commercial. It's spelled Nike, but it could be Nike. So just bear that in mind. In Wandaba, as we move ahead into 2005, Appleseed was in 2005. We move further ahead in 2005. In Wandaba style, she'd be cast as the English voice of Hanagata's mother. In Princess Tutu, she'd be cast the English voice of Palamoni. In Ease Otherwise, she'd be cast the English voice of Sherry, very similar to her name. In Gravian Zwei, she would reprise her role as the English voice of Tessera. In Elfin Lied, she'd be cast the English voice of Shirakawa. In the Gilgamesh anime, she'd be cast as the English voice of Kyoko Madoka. In Samurai Gun, she'd be cast as the English voice of Ohana. In Mythical Detective Loki Ragnarok, she'd be cast as the adult form of the English voice of the adult form of Freya. In Ghost Story, she'd be cast in a number of support roles, including the English voices of classmate students, Miyuki, PA announcer, and Boy's mother. In Hakuge, Legend of the Moby Dick, she'd be cast as the English voice of Irene. Then in 2006, in This Ugly Yet Beautiful World, she would provide, of course, the narrator's voice for that series, as well as being cast the English voice of Jennifer Portman. 2006, she'd be cast in the Funimation dub of Shin-Chan as the English voice of Suzanne Barnes. In Jinki Extend, she'd be cast as the English voice of Minami Kosaka. In Pani Pony Dash, she'd be cast as the English voice of Miyuki Igarashi. We move ahead into 2007. In Best Student Council, she'd be cast as the English voice of Nanaho Kinjo. In Uta Wareru Mono, she'd be cast as the English voice of Karula. Also in 2007, in Air Gear, the rollerblading anime, she was cast as the English voice of Mikan Noyamano. In Le Chevalier d'Eon, she'd be cast as the English voice of Madame du Pompadour. In Korar Phantom Memory, she'd be cast as the English voice of Klein Zaxman. In 009-1, she'd be cast as the English voice of Mary. In Air, the Air TV in the Air TV show, in the Air anime TV anime, she'd be cast as the English voice of Yukito's mother. In Red Garden, she'd be cast as the English voice of Lulu. In Welcome to the NHK, she'd be cast as the English voice of the Soba Noodle Prophetess. In Air the movie, the anime movie Air, in the Air anime movie, she would reprise her role as Yukito's mother, English voice of Yukito's mother. In the An Appleseed Ex Machina, she'd reprise her role as English voice of Nike, however you want to pronounce that. In the 2008 ADV dub of the 2006 Kanon series, she'd be cast as English voice of Mai's mother. In Devil May Cry in 2008, she'd be cast as English voice of Elena Devil. Also in 2008, she'd provide the English voice of Sarah in Kiba. In Red Garden Dead Girl, she'd be cast as the English voice of a woman who bears a striking resemblance to her character Lulu in the first Red Garden anime. But now she's just called Woman here. Then, as we move ahead to 2010, she would be cast in Funimation's dub of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood as the English voice of a young Pinako Rockbell, of course, the grandmother of Winry Rockbell. In Halo Legends, she would provide the English voices for Cortana and Dr. Halsey. In the anime Clannad, she would be cast as the English voice of Kyo Fujibayashi. Then in Golgo 13, she had a number of supporting roles in that. She would be cast as the English voices of the following characters: Linda, Queen Cybele, Catherine McCall, Escort, Anne Brown, Madame Martin, Red Pepper, and a woman actress. Kind of funny. She's blonde and she gets cast as a lot of blondes in voice work as well. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Then in the Sentai, I believe this might be the Sentai dub of Legends of the Dark King: A Fist of the North Star story in 2010, she would be casting as the voice of Sakuya. In Master of Martial Arts, she'd be cast as the English voice of Suzuko Iseshima. In Cashern Sins, she would be casting as the voice of Lita. In Blue Drop, she'd be cast as the English voice of Mari's grandmother. In Ghost Hound, she'd provide the English voice of Kei Yakushi. In Zombed Lost Memory, she'd provide the English voice of Ishu Benikawa. In Kanan, she'd provide the English voice for the lead character Kanan. In Sekirei, she'd provide the English voice of Takami Sahashi. In the Summer Wars anime movie, she'd provide the English voice of Mariko Shinoshi. Then as we move into 2011, in High School of the Dead, she would provide the English voice of Yuriko Takagi. She would then reprise her role as Kyo Fujibayashi in Clannad the Motion Picture. In Green Saga, she'd be casting as voice of Anak. She would of course once again reprise her role as Kyo Fujibayashi in Clannad After Story and Clannad Another World Kyo chapter. Also in Clannad After Story, she'd provide the English voice of Yuki as well. In Demon King Damao, she would provide the English voice of Fujiko Eto. In Samurai Girl, she'd provide the English voice of Matabe Goto. In Eden of the East Movie 2, Paradise Lost, she would be cast as the English voice of Shigusa Umuma. In Lopes equals Goros, she would provide the English voice of Shizue Fua. In the Rosario Vampire anime, Rosario Vampire and Rosario Vampire Kapudos, she'd provide the English voice of Ririko Kagome. She would then reprise her role as Takami Sahashi in Sekirei Pure Engagement and Sekirei Pure Engagement 2 Gossip Topics in 2012, as we move ahead into 2012 here. In Full Metal Alchemist, The Sacred Star of Milo, she'd be cast the English voice of Miranda. In The World God Only Knows, she would be cast the English voice of Mari Katsuragi. In the Broken Blade anime movie series, she would be cast the English voice of Narvi Strives. In Dream Eater Mary, she'd be cast the English voice of Seki Kirishima. In the Book of Bantora, she'd provide both versions of the voice, the modern and the younger version of Hamut's Maseda. In Shiki, she'd provide the English voice of Kazuko Okawa. In Gintama, the movie, she would be casting as the voice of Tai Shimura, Mitsuba Okita, and Otose. In the Toa no Kwan movie, she'd be cast as in the Toa no Kwan movie series, anime movie series. She'd be casting the voice of Delta Hizuru Asuka. In The World God Only Knows 2, she would reprise her role as the English voice of Mari Katsuragi. In Starship Troopers Invasion, she'd be cast as the voice of Jonah. In Heaven's Memo Pad, she would provide in 2012. She'd provide the English voice of Mean Lee Huan. In Majikoi O Samurai Girl, she'd provide the English. She would be casting the voice of Ageha Kuki. In the Ungo Episode 0 movie, she'd provide the English voice of Yuko Kurata. And then in Ungo the series, she would be casting the English voice of Takako Yajima. In Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere, she would be cast as the English voice of Naomasa. In Children Who Chase Lost Voices anime movie, she'd provide the English voice for Asana's mother. Okay, let's see. In The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, the animation, she would be casting the voice of Sherazard Harvey. In Penguin Drum, she would provide the English voices of Yuri Tokikago and Goddess. Then, as we move into 2013, in Bodacious Space Pirates, she would provide the English voice of Rurika Kato. In Sayuki Gaiden, she would provide the English voice of Merciful Goddess. In Kami-sama Dolls, she'd provide the English voice of Shihaya Seno. In Battle Girls Time Paradox, she would provide the English voice of Nobunaga Oda. In Tokyo Magnitude 8.0, she would provide the English voice of Mari Kusakabe. In Inu Boku Secret Service, she would provide the English voice of Nobara Yukino Koji. In Hiro no Kakera, the Tamayori Princess Saga, She would provide the English voice of Veer. In Kids on the Slope, she was cast as the English voice of Kaoru's mother. In Tenchi Muyo War on Geminar, she would provide the English voice of Amera. In Appleseed 13, the Appleseed 13 anime, she would reprise her role as the English voice of Nike, depending on how you want to pronounce it. In Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere 2, she would be cast as English voices of Mary, Scarred, and Elizabeth. In Special A, she would be cast English voice of Sumire Carino. In the Garden of Words anime movie, she'd provide the English voice of Takao's mother. In Shining Heart, she would be casting as voices of Flora and Sammy. In AKB0048, she'd be casting as the voice of Tsubasa Katagiri. In Medaka Box, she'd be cast as the lead role as the English voice of Medaka Kurakami. In Kokoro Connect, she'd be casting as the voice of Yui's mother. In Naikamo, my little sister is among them. She'd be cast as in 2013. We're now into 2013, of course. She'd be cast as the English voice of Kanoko Mikadono. Also in 2013, in the Majin Ki anime series, in Majin Ki Battling Venus and Majin Ki OVA, she would provide the English voice of Tomika Amato. In La Storia della Arcana Famiglia, she'd provide the English voice of Samiri. In Girls und Panzer, she'd provide the English voices of Moyoko, Gomoyo, Goto, and Ami Chono. In Fairy Tail the movie Phoenix Priestess, she would provide the English voice of a coordinator. In Batum, she'd provide the English voices for Hidemi Kinoshita and Yukie Sakamoto. In Nyan Koi, she'd provide the English voice of Shizue Kosaka. She would then reprise her role as the English voice of Medaka Kurakami in Medaka Box Abnormal. She would then reprise her role as Tsubasa Katagiri in AKB 0048 Next Stage in 2014. Of course, now we're into 2014. Also in 2014, she would be casting as the voice of Tomoko Sato in MM. In the anime Jormungand and Jormungand Perfect Order, she'd be casting as the voice of Karen Lowe. She would then reprise her role as Moyoko Gomoyo Goto in the Girls und Panzer OVA. In the Short Piece anime movie, she'd be casting as voice of Ume. In Ukari, she'd be cast as the English voice of Miss Fujiko, FG42. In From the New World, she'd be cast as the English voices of False Minoshiro and Mini Minoshiro. In the 2014 Sentai dub of Hakaden 8 Dogs of the East, she'd be casting as voices of Lilith, Shinobu's mother, Kayako Kabaragi, and Daikokudo's wife. Then she would reprise her role as Matabe Goto in Samurai Bride, as well as a Samurai Girl short in 2014. In Devil Survivor 2, the animation, she'd provide the English voice of Fumi Kamino. In Majestic Prince, she would provide the English voice of Rin Suzakaze. In Watamote, she would provide the English voice of Tomoko's mother. In Fate Khalid Liner Prisma Ilia, she'd provide the English voice of Luvia Galita Edelfelt. In Sunday Without God, she would provide the English voice of Pox and Anna. English voice of Pox and Anna. In Log Horizon, she'd provide the English voice of Henrietta. In Infinite Stratos 2, she would provide the English voice of Reiko Autumn Makagami. In The Ambition of Oda Nobuna, she'd be cast as the English voice of Matsunaga Danjo Hitsuhide. She would once again reprise her role as Mari Katsuragi in The World God Only Knows Goddesses in 2015. We're now getting into 2015. As well as the Tenri arc of The World God Only Knows, she would reprise her role as Mari Katsuragi. In Akame ga Kill, she would provide the English voice of Najenda. In Hamatora, the animation, she'd provide the English voice of Shoko Ito. In Brynhildr, in the Darkness, she would provide the English voice of Miki. She would then reprise her role as Najenda in the Akakil Theater short in 2016. Also in 2016, in Fate Khalid Liner Prisma Ilia Tway, she would reprise her role as Luvia Julita Edelfelt, as well as in the Fate Khalid Liner Prisma Ilia short. In Wizard Barrister, she'd provide the English voice of Ageha Chono. She would then reprise her role as Karula in the Utararumono OVA. We're now into 2016 here. In Mocking Key 2, she would reprise her role as Tomika Amato. She would then reprise her role as Henrietta in Log Horizon 2. She would then once again reprise her role as Rurika Kato in Bodacious Space Pirates Abyss of Hyperspace. Also in 2016, in Cross Ong Rondo of Angel and Dragon, she would be casting the voice of Zola Axberg. In the 2016 anime movie Girls und Panzer der Film, she would reprise her roles as Moyoko Gomoyo Goto and Ami Chono. She would then, of course, reprise her role in 2017. She would once again reprise her role as Luvia Gelita Edelfelt in, Luvia Gelita Edelfelt in Fate Khalid Liner Prisma Ilia Tway Hertz. She would then reprise her role as Moyoko Gomoyo Goto in the 2017 anime Girls und Panzer. This is the real Anzio battle. Also in 2017, in the anime Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, she would be casting the voice of Ace Wallenstein. In Diabolic Lovers, More Blood, She would be cast as the English voice of the young Ruki Mukami. She would then reprise her role in 2017 as of Karula in the Utawarumono The False Faces anime. In Chivalry of a Failed Knight, she would be casting as voice of Kanata Totokubara. In the anime Monster Musume, she'd be cast as English voice of Smith. Then in Food Wars, in Food Wars, Shokugeki no Soma, she would provide the English voices of Kinu Nakamozu, Service Division Woman B, and Ikumi's mother. And now as we move ahead to 2018, in the anime movie Typhoon Noruda, she would provide the English voice of Momoi. In Flip Flappers, she would provide the English voice of Mimi. She would then reprise her role as Ace Wallenstein in the Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon OVA. Also in 2018, in the Bloom Into You anime, she'd be cast as the English voice of Toko's mother. In 2019, she'd be casting the voice of Yamada's mother in Kase-san and Morning Glories. And then also in 2019, she would reprise her role again as Ace Wallenstein Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Arrow of the Orion movie. And in this year, in 2020, she's had some roles too. I just gotta grab those real quick here. So in 2020, she would be cast. She would cast in the anime in the second season of Banji Dream as the English voice of Rei Wakana Lair. She would also be cast as the English voice of Ayano Ida in The Pet Girl of Sakura So. In The Demon Girl Next Door, she'd be casting the voice of Seiko Yoshida, and then in the English dub of the anime Shiro Bako, she'd be casting the voice of Mari Tateo, Mrs. Yasuhara. So that's all of that is all of Shelley's credits. Um, may have heard some of those before. As always, guys, if you get into these voice actors and actresses' works, and you really want to meet them at a convention, you got to contact your local cons to do it. You got to let them know via email or what have you that you want to meet them. That hey, I want to meet this person. So that's how you get voice actors to cons. I hope that through this series, I've been able to provide you with some good information. Um, you know, as always, guys, you can always contact me directly either through my Discord by direct messaging me there or leaving a comment in the community section of my channel. Um, and if you look at the links below, of course, my Discord's down there, but I also have a list of some other dub companies other than Funimation, because there's a lot of them out there. Also, still promoting Vic's GoFundMe as well as Tug's Indiegogo project. As always, guys, never feel like you have to donate. It's on your heart to do so, and if it is on your heart to do so, and you have the means to do so, please consider it. If you've already done so, please consider doing it again. And if you cannot donate, you can still help out the cause by sharing the link. Because sharing is caring. You never know. Maybe somebody in your circle of friends may want to help out as well. Um, Also, if you like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I always look forward to the conversation with you guys as long as it's civil and respectful. Um, Also, don't forget I live stream Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. You can figure out everything in between and beyond. And with that, I shall bid you all adieu. See you next time. Bye.